G'day, Jinx here, and welcome to my next tutorial for DoomTools. I'm going to try and be a bit quicker this time. My tutorials are very long, people tell me. But anyway, this one is going to focus on the creation of resource WADs. So that is a WAD that has all your data inside it that you either release publicly for other people to use in their projects, or you give to your mappers if you're part of a team, and then they map using those provided resources. I'll also talk about how to take multiple maps that have been made using a resource WAD and produce a mega WAD with those maps and those resources. I'll talk about that at the end. But the first thing you should always do is make sure DoomTools is up to date. So just go to your search, DoomTools, come in here, and you'll have this big long command here. Just paste that into your command line and blammo, and it will update. DoomTools is constantly being updated. Look, it's actually been updated since the last time I did that. So it's always good to have the latest version because Mtrop is constantly making this better and better. Next thing I'm going to do is using the GUI, just to make it easier for you guys because I do everything by command line. Oh, it should be noted that you can go help check for updates here inside the GUI as well. So I'm just going to go Tools, DoomMake, New Project. I'm going to make a WAD, select my projector, and I'm going to do Maps, Assets. I'm going to use DecoHack, and I'm going to use Textures and Boom because I make MBF21 stuff. I'm going to go Create. I'll call this DoomTools Tut Editor Resources. I'm going to select the Doom2.wad. I'm using the Kex Doom port Doom2.wad, and I'm going to use DSD hacked. I'm just going to open that folder, and here is the DoomTools project we've created. I'm just going to open a command shell here and just type in DoomMake. I always like to do a single DoomMake at the beginning of my project just to ensure that everything's done. It's going to basically write empty data, but it's just a habit I have. Okay, so I'm ready to go. Now I'm just going to load up SLADE and load up the Doom2 WAD just to have a quick look into it. And I'm also going to load up the Doom1 WAD. And in Doom2, I'm just going to type texture, and I'm going to do the same thing in the Doom1 WAD. We're going to type texture. Now you'll notice that in the Doom1 WAD, there's TEXTURE1 and TEXTURE2, and in the Doom WAD, there's only TEXTURE1. Now these are the texture definition files, and I've talked about these in other videos. I'm not going to go over it all again, but basically these are not additive. That means whatever is the last WAD that you've loaded in your load order, it is that WAD and that WAD alone that is going to have its texture definitions used by Doom when you run it in your source port. So let's just go to Doom World. I'm going to go to Resources. I'm going to go to Post Your Doom Textures. I'll just click on the last page. I'll just grab something randomly. It doesn't really matter what it is. I want a wall texture though. Okay, so these ones here will do. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save all these into my Convert folder inside my DoomTools project. So here's my file manager. I'll just go into Source. I go into Convert. I go into TEXTURE1. And here are all the files. Now remember, when you dump graphics into the TEXTURE1 folder or the TEXTURE2 folder that do not require patch editing, as in it's not a texture made up of patches, it's just a single bitmap and that's the whole texture. If you just chuck them in the Textures1 folder, DoomTools will automatically create the texture lump for you and turn them into patches and do everything for you. So basically, if you are a designer who likes to design your textures as single textures, like the ones we're using here, where the actual entire bitmap data is the entire texture, you just chuck it in TEXTURE1 or chuck it in TEXTURE2, and DoomTools itself will handle the creation of the texture definition. There's nothing else you need to do. So I've added these textures here, okay? And also, what I like to do, let's just grab Awesome Face's name. We go straight to source. We go straight to credits, edit that, and I'm just going to write textures, Awesome Face, and I'm just going to copy this post. Now to copy a direct link to an individual post on DoomWorld, all you need to do is copy the link where it says posted. So see where it just says posted June 13th. You copy that as a link and that will then be a link directly to that post. And paste that in there, and that's an exact link to where you got the credits from. And that's now recorded in my project. There's one more thing that we need to check. When you are doing the TEXTURE1 or TEXTURE2 folders where DoomTools automatically creates the texture definitions for you, it will use the bitmap name as the texture name. And now in Doom, there's an 8-character limit to names inside the lumps because that was a limitation in DOS back in the day. So any files that are longer than 8 characters, DoomTools will have to truncate for it to work. And if the truncation creates duplicates, you're going to get errors. So make sure that every file inside the TEXTURE1 or TEXTURE2 dir in your convert folder is a maximum of 8 chars. And in this case, we're going to have that error. So I'm going to rename some of these files just so they're under 8 chars. Now that I've got all that, I'm in my DoomMake project folder, and I'm just going to type in DoomMake to build the project. So let's go back into our file manager. We'll come over here. We'll go into our build folder, and you can see it's built all the data, and you can see it's created a textures.wad. So this is a WAD that DoomTools creates that simply has all our source files for textures and flats collected, regardless of whether we're using them in our map file or not. This file here, the one that says textureResource.wad, this is what they call the release WAD. So to cut a long story short, because I'm sort of getting off track here, is the release WAD is like, say you make a mega WAD, right? Your mega WAD has a number of maps in it. It's also got all your other assets and stuff inside it as well. This is the file that DoomTools creates for the mega WAD for you to send out and release to the public. But the important thing is that the way DoomTools works with its importing features, it'll only take the textures required for those maps from your textures.wad file, which means your textures.wad or your source project could be hundreds of thousands of gigabytes of just billions of data if you wanted it to. I mean, you wouldn't, but it could be. But your release WAD is only going to use the exact textures used by your map files. That's the difference. Now we're creating for this tutorial a resource WAD like a texture pack or something that we can hand off to mappers or we can release publicly. So it's something a bit different from a normal mega WAD kind of WAD because we want to have all the source files available in the resource WAD for the mapper to use. And then when we correlate that into the release WAD, into the release mega WAD, we're only going to use the exact resources we need, but the mapper wants everything so they can pick and choose freely. But anyway, like I said, I'm getting off track. Let's get back to it. So if I load up the textures.wad, you can see we have the files that we added in as bitmaps. And if I click on TEXTURE1, you can see that in the TEXTURE1, it only has those files, nothing else, because we haven't told DoomTools to use the original Doom 1 WADs. Okay, so let's actually load up what would be a release file. Okay, and we'll have a quick look at that one. You can see there's nothing in here at all except for some blank placeholder stuff. But if I look at the TEXTURE1 in this file, you can see that even though we haven't done anything, it's added all the original Doom texture definitions to this file. And that is going to allow this file to be run without errors. So let's just load up Ultimate Doom Builder. I'm going to go File, New Map, MBF21, and I'm going to call this map 99. I find that if you're making a resource WAD for someone, it's handy to have a map bundled with the resource WAD that is using your new resources so people can see it in action. It's just a handy thing. I usually make it map 99, do whatever you want. But we're going to call this map 99, and we're going to add a resource. We're going to go to our DoomTools project. We're going to go build, and we're going to click on the textures.wad. And this time, unlike my normal instructions, I'm not going to untick exclude. I'm just going to OK. I'm going to draw a little box. I'm going to put in a start player, and let's just go into 3D view because it's a bit more visual. I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to click on the Sartan texture, and in the texture browser, you can see I now have TEXTURE1. I click on it. There's only 7 textures. Very easy to see. So say I click on EBOM1, and I'll just copy that folders, other walls, and we're done. So let's save this. I'm going to go File, Save Map as in my DoomTools folder, I go source, maps, and hit save. Now, here's the crux. If I hit play, this is going to error. Boom, error. And that is because the load order is loading that texture.wad at the end. Now we need the texture.wad, otherwise we won't see our new textures. But because that texture.wad does not have the original TEXTURE1's Doom 2 definitions in it, in addition to our new stuff, it will error because Doom will load, say, map01 and say, I want to show this texture that is part of that original map, but there's going to be no definition for that texture, which means it's going to crash out. And that is why you need to include all the original Doom definitions in your WAD in some way to make it compatible with anyone running a raw version of Doom. If you are doing like a total conversion, you don't really need to worry about this because no maps or anything is going to call any of that original data. But usually when you make a resource WAD, you are making an additive WAD to the existing Doom data. So it's just a good practice to always include the original Doom texture definitions, and that way it's always compatible. So if I just go to my command prompt and I run DoomMake and rebuild the project, which will rebuild the release WAD, but also include in that release WAD our new textures, and then load it up in SLADE, you can see we now have the map data for map 99, and it's also added in our new texture that it's taken from the convert folders, okay? Now if I look at the TEXTURE1, you can see that it has all the Doom 2 texture definitions, and it's taking the actual texture patch data from the iWAD itself, not from our release WAD. But it also has our new one, and that's why this file will work and the other file won't, because it's got the Doom 2 definitions inside it in addition to our stuff. So the way you can get around that in Doom Builder, map options, we double click on the texture1.wad and we just go exclude. So it's not added to the load order at all when we're loading Doom. And we're going to go add resource and we're going to add the actual final version. And this will now work. Okay. So now if I hit play, it's loading up fine. That's because the texture definitions file is all fixed. Now, if you see my other tutorials, this is how I usually work with the excluded thing. And then I put a DoomMake command into my map options to actually build the project every time I hit play. And that's how I work on maps that I'm working on for myself for release in a megawad style. But this tutorial is about creating a resource pack for other people. And there's a little trick using the texture2 definitions lump that makes textures a lot easier to work with. If I just go back into my project and I go into the source, convert, and I come down into my TEXTURE1 here, I'm just going to copy all these and I'm going to move them into TEXTURE2. So now they're in the TEXTURE2 folder instead of the TEXTURE1 folder. Now I'm going to do a DoomMake clean just to make sure it's nice and clean for this. I'm going to do a DoomMake. I'm going to go back into Ultimate Doom Builder and I'm going to go edit map options. I'm just going to remove the final WAD. I'm going to double click on the texture WAD and I'm going to set it to no longer be excluded. And okay, now let's come in here. Let's go to this wall. We'll open up the middle and you can see that inside our texture WAD, it's now getting the data from TEXTURE2 and it's working just as easily. Okay, so we can turn it to this one. Okay, that's all very well and good, you think? So if I do a play, that should now work, right? Well, no. As you can see, still erroring. And the reason is, let's go into SLADE, and looking at the texture WAD in SLADE, you can see that even though TEXTURE2 has all our data correctly as we want, right? It still has a TEXTURE1 lump that has nothing in it. Now, we could actually just delete the TEXTURE1 lump from this WAD and it would work fine. Because what's happening is it's loading the TEXTURE2 WAD that we want, but it's also loading the TEXTURE1, which is replacing the original Doom iWAD TEXTURE1. So if you just don't have that lump in this WAD, it would work fine. But unfortunately, DoomTools requires a TEXTURE1 by default. So what we need to do is we need to import the original Doom 2 data into there, and DoomTools can actually do that for you almost automated. So we're just going to go back into our folder. We're going to come up to the root of our folder, then we go source, and we go straight into textures. And here you can see the text file definitions. Okay, so if we have a look in TEXTURE1, you can see there's nothing in there. It's basically blank. And our TEXTURE2 is blank as well, because the TEXTURE2 data that's been automatically generated by placing the complete textures in the TEXTURE2 folder aren't added here. This is so when you're editing your patches, your patch edits are all compartmentalized and just your patch edits go into this text file. All we need to do is delete that texture1.txt file completely. Just get rid of it. Open our command prompt. And if you type DoomMake -- targets, it'll give you a list of all the targets. And one of them is called rebuild textures. So if we type in DoomMake rebuild textures, you can see that it writes the TEXTURE2 and it's extracting it from the iWad Doom 2. So if we come back into our folder, you can see the TEXTURE1 text file is there now. And now if we have a look at that in the text editor, you can see it has all the patches from our iWad. So let's do another DoomMake, come back into the Ultimate Doom Builder, and this time we're going to hit F8 to just refresh. Come over to this wall now. We'll go to middle texture. And you can see for the textures2.wad, we now have the 7 textures, our 7 custom textures inside TEXTURE2. But if we click on TEXTURE1, we have all the original Doom textures, all sorted already for us. So you can see the original Doom2.wad, 427 textures in the definition file, and you can see 427 textures in the definition file for textures1.wad. So they're exactly the same. Now what's really great about this method is that all our custom stuff is separated into its own little section in DoomTools where we can quickly find them without having to scroll through. Like if you look at texture release wads that you get from the internet from the older days, all the custom stuff is all mixed up in the textures1 folder. But now they're all in textures2. But the interesting thing is, because Doom 2 has no textures2, it's a Doom 1 thing, this means there is no longer any conflict. You can edit away, do whatever you like with your textures, but you're never actually modifying the iWad texture lump, which means your resource file is always going to be completely 100% compatible with your original iWad. So now we can just run this from Ultimate Doom Builder, and now it'll just work. We don't have to do any builds, we don't have to do anything, because the WAD is already constructed in a way that it's going to load perfectly without conflicts from the command line. Now, interestingly, flats don't have this problem, because flats don't have any kind of texture definitions. They're just 64 by 64 raw images. So if I go into my source folder, I'm going to go into convert, and I'm going to go into flats, and I've made 4 flats just cropping those textures. Okay, so they're basically just 4 flats I've created from a couple of those textures that I got from Doom World. I'm just going to copy them in, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into Doom Builder, and this time I'm just going to go edit map options. I'm going to go edit pre and post commands, and where it says reload resources, I'm just going to hit browse, and I'm going to browse to the root of my DoomTools project and select that folder, and then I'm just going to type in DoomMake release and hit OK. And all that's going to do is that I will now be able to run a DoomMake build without going to the command line by just hitting refresh in DoomTools, and that's F8. So I hit F8, it does a build, and now let's just go into the flats. We'll go to the floor, and you can see my texture WAD has 4 flats that I just added in. So let's use this one here, flat 2. Hit OK, and I don't even need to save this. I don't even need to do a build target or anything, because the flats and the textures will load perfectly fine because we've constructed the resource WAD in that way. So I can just hit play and it's ready to go. So flats are a lot easier to use. You just copy the flats into the flat folder and you're done. It'll already be separated into the texture WAD, so you only see your custom flats, and all the Doom flats are in the Doom2.wad above. So flats are basically already done for you. Just copy them in and that's the end of that. But the interesting thing is that if I go into SLADE and load up the textures.wad, you can see it's got the flats I made installed, and it's also got the textures that I've installed. It's got the original Doom 2 texture definitions, so that's fine. We could actually choose to delete that before we passed it off to people if we wanted. And it's got the texture definitions with just our custom stuff. So this is a completely working textures WAD. If you have done animated switches and animated walls, it's also got these two lumps as well for that. So if you were just interested in releasing a texture pack, this is actually the file that you would release. The only thing I'd probably add to this WAD before I released it publicly is I would just import in using SLADE, just quickly get the credits and the WAD info.text from your source folder. But basically the textures.wad is a fully functional texture resource WAD that you can just hand to people. And because of the way we did the TEXTURE1 and 2 thing, we don't have to worry about any kind of compatibility. It's foolproof. If they're running the Doom 2Y WAD, all they need to do is add it to their load order or add it to Ultimate Doom Builder and just map away and it'll work. But the thing is, when you're releasing a resource pack, especially if you're releasing it for other mappers, you might have custom weapons, you might have custom dehacked objects, you might have custom monsters. There's a lot of other stuff that's in there. So while textures.wad is a pure texture WAD, what we want is a resource WAD. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to populate this project with some other assets, and then I'll show you how to make the actual editor WAD, and then we're pretty much ready to go. Okay, so I've done all that. So what I've done is if I come into my source folder, I go into my convert folder, and if I go into my flats, there's the flats I copied in during the tutorial. If I go into the texture 2, there's the texture 2 I copied in during the tutorial. But if I now go into sprites, I've actually copied in my Caco Ferno custom monster that I made a while back. It's got its own little zappy thing, and it's basically a sprite modified version of the Caco that has its own deco hack and stuff like that. Okay. That also means that if I go into deco hack, I've put in the deco hack required to create that Caco. And if I go back into convert and I go into the graphics folder, I've included a Doom mug. I've included a status bar, beg your pardon, a new status bar. And I've also added a Doom mug that I got off Doomwell. If you look into the description of the video, you'll see links to where I got all these source files. Now, obviously, I've also put in a title, a new mdoom, and a new just graphic for the title screen. And this is just an example. I mean, you could have a lot more stuff, sounds, music, whatever. This is it's just an example that I've added more assets than just the individual textures like before. So let's load up our command line, and I'm just going to do a DoomMake clean just to make sure the project's completely new for us. And then I'm going to do a DoomMake release. And then after I do the DoomMake release, I'm going to type in DoomMake editor. And you can see we've written an extra file. Wrote editor-assets.wad. So if we come into our builder now, and we look at our new file, editor assets, you can see that this has the dehack file, it has the deco hack code so people can make their own edits, it's got the status bar, the Doom mug, it's got all the sprites, and basically it's got everything that we need, okay? While the texture one here only has the textures. So let's go back into Ultimate Doom Builder, modified our project just a little bit, but let's go into Edit Map Options. I'm going to remove the TEXTURE1 WAD that we've been using. And now I'm going to go Add Resource and add the Editor Assets WAD. And now, without doing anything, I can actually just run the play, right? And it's going to load. And the reason why that loads is because we've done the TEXTURE1 thing. Because even though we're loading assets WAD now, like you can see the new status bar at the bottom there, right? Because we're not having a conflicting texture one, the assets WAD is working. So this file here is what I can hand to other mappers. It contains all our resources, all our assets, and our textures required. So let's load up editor assets inside SLADE, and you can see I've got all the textures, all the graphics textures assets. I've got the sprite assets, and I've also got, just like the texture WAD, all the flats and all the textures, all our custom textures, not just the ones we're using in our map. So this is actually the file that you will give people. Now, like the textures.wad, this will not include your credits or your WAD info text files. So I usually manually add in SLADE the credits text files, input files. I just go to my source folder and I just grab credits and boom, there's the credits file there, and that's ready to send. Now, I've only included the small amount of assets just as a demo, but this will actually have all your sounds and everything that you want. So this is the completely working assets file. The other thing I like to do with the assets WAD, if I just close this, is if I have a demo map, like say this is a demo map, this is demo map 99. Let's just put the caco in it for starters. So you can see that it is actually got my caco, my custom monster. So I can just show you a demo of that. Oh, he's so awesome. Cute little guy. Anyway, but what I like to do is I like to get my demo WAD. I also go File, Save Map Into, and save it into the Assets WAD. So now, if I go back into SLADE, load up that Assets WAD, you can see as well as all that other stuff, we've also got the Map 99 demo. So when I provide an assets WAD to someone, I like to have a map that has an example. Like you make a map that is a proper level that uses all your new resources so that people can just see it in action, get an idea of what the vibe of the whole WAD's going to be. Right, so we've basically created our release WAD now. So let's pretend that I'm now a mapper who has downloaded that release WAD or been provided to it from the project server or something like that. And we want to use those assets to make our map. So we're just going to go File, New Map, we just make it map 01, and we're just going to go Add Resource and browse to our editor release file. We're not going to click Exclude and just go OK. So I'm just going to make a little demo room for us, nothing fancy, just a couple of pillars, and use some of the new textures. Okay, so this is what we've got. So I'll just change this floor flat, and you can see I've got editor-asset.wad, and I've got all my flats. So let's just add them quickly. So I'll just go through and add some of the other flats to this little tiny demo room. For this wall, we'll go here. You've got our textures WAD. It's all working. We've got the Doom textures in here, but we have all our new textures in this little separate section. Very, very easy to see. So I'm just going to apply some textures to the remaining missing walls and of course add a player start. And basically this map is ready to go. I'm just going to save this, and I'm just going to save this to my desktop because remember, we are no longer using DoomTools. This is for just a hand to a mapper to use without any need to run DoomTools or use any fancy build stuff, because the asset file itself has been made in a way that will just work. So now we just hit play, and you can see it's completely working as is. We've got our flats, we've got our new wall textures, and we've got our original Doom maps as working as well, right? So that's all very well and good. And you can see I've even got the new status bar, and of course, I've got any new dehacked content as well is also included. I'll just stick him on there. And there we are. That's the editor assets WAD. And remember, we did the textures WAD before. So you have two different files you can create. One is a textures only release WAD, and the other one is a editor assets that contain all the assets, including the textures. Both of them, because we use the texture2 trick, are completely compatible with Doom without any fiddling around. There is one thing you need to keep an eye on when you're creating these texture release WADs and these editor asset release WADs, and that is PLAYPALs and color maps. So I'm just going to load up a WAD called Spectrum Descent, which is one of my favorite WADs ever made by Ludi. And I'm just going to export the raw lump for the PLAYPAL from this WAD. So I go to my DoomTools project, I'm going to go to source, and because I'm actually converting this, I'm just going to use the raw export. I'm just going to put it straight into assets, palettes. I'm going to do the same thing with color maps. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go graphic. I'm going to do this as export as PNG. This time I'm going to go into source, convert, color maps. And also, if I just sort this list by type, you can see that they've actually included these colored color maps for 242 color changes, which is an effect in Boom where you can change the color map on the fly. I'm going to go to graphics, export as PNG, and I'm going to place them in secondary color maps. I go into my project folder and I'll just do a clean. I don't really need to do cleans all the time. I just do it to show you that it works from a clean builder, not just from one that you're previously working on. And now I'm going to do a DoomMake release. And then I'm going to do a DoomMake editor. I go to the root of my folder, I go into build, and let's load up the actual release WAD, the mega WAD in inverted commas. I probably should have named it mega WAD. You can see that it has the PLAYPAL, it has the color map, and if I sort by type, it also has the other 242 color maps, or these color maps here, right? But check this out. If I actually open up the editor assets WAD, it has the PLAYPAL, it has the color map. If I sort by type, it's also got these color maps. So the editor assets WAD has everything because it includes all the assets. But if I open up the textures.wad, so this is the textures.wad, the one I said you can release to people. By default, it does not include the color maps, nor does it include the secondary color maps. If I go to my edit assets at WAD, I just get it by type. Let's just copy all those color maps out and I'll paste them into the textures.wad. And I'll also get the PLAYPAL, copy that out. And you'll notice this graphic looks weird because it's been converted to the new palette, but the palette isn't included in this WAD. So if I copy this in now and save it, and now we go to that same texture, it looks fine because it's been mapped to the existing palette. So what I'm trying to get here is that while the editor asset WAD does contain the palette file and your color map files, the textures WAD by default does not. And also, for when you're doing a release, the editor assets WAD and the textures.wad will not contain your credits files, which I think are vitally important to be included. So just remember, if you are using custom secondary color maps and custom PLAYPALs, you want to add them manually into the WAD before you release it for your textures WAD. It'll be fine for the editor assets WAD, but your textures WAD will need to have them added unless you make your own build target, which is a whole other topic. But you can create your own DoomTools build targets. It'll create it correctly for you if you wish. Oh, and also, of course, remember to put in the credits as well. Oh, one more thing, just before I go, let's load up the Doom iWAD for Doom 1. Now, this method that I've been talking about, it is actually going to make it incompatible by default if you use the exact instructions I've given you for Doom 1, because Doom 1 has its own texture2 lump, which needs to be respected in the same way the texture1 lump needs to be respected for Doom 2. So the texture2 lump for Doom has all these textures in it for the original Doom iWAD. And the TEXTURE1 lump also has all these textures in it. And just like Doom 2, if these texture definitions are missing, it will crash when it loads. Now, there is lots of ways around this, and it is possible to create a resource WAD that is compatible with both Doom 1 and Doom 2 at once, but it's a bit of a complicated thing, and I don't really think it's necessary. Personally, I just make the resource WAD work with Doom 1 or work with Doom 2 and make 2 copies of the WAD if I want to release it publicly. So I'll just go through the steps of how I make a Doom 1 compatible resource WAD for textures and for assets. And it's very, very simple. And it's basically exactly what we've just done with one little tweak at the start. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing, just this initial setup. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly make a new Doom 1 project. I'm going to go Tools, DoomMake, New Project. I'm going to browse to the folder I'm going to create it in. I'm just going to go Maps, Assets. I'm not going to add DecoHack this time just to make it a bit simpler. Textures with Boom, because that's the way I like to work. I'm going to go Create. I'll call this MegaWAD. And for the iWAD, I'm going to select Doom 1, not Doom 2. I'll just open that and I'll click Build just to do a quick build. And here we are in the actual project folder. So just like before, I'm going to go into Source, I'm going to go into Textures, and I'm going to delete Texture 1 and 2 this time, like both of them. So in the command prompt, once again, let's type DoomMake targets just to remind ourselves. So we've got rebuild textures, so we're just going to do that same thing again. So that's DoomMake, rebuild textures, and you can see that it's extracted from the Doom 1 WAD, Textures 1 and Textures 2. And you can see now I have the Textures 1 and the Textures 2 definition. And this is the trick I do to make a Doom compatible resource WAD. I just edit Textures 2, I just copy that whole thing out, and as in remove it, and then I edit Textures 1, and I just paste them all in at the bottom. So all I've basically done is I've just merged Textures 1 and Textures 2 into the same texture definitions file. And now I'll just go DoomMake release. And if I go into the Textures WAD, you can see there's nothing in it because I haven't put any textures in. But if I go into Textures 1, I have all the definitions that would used to be split between Textures 1 and Textures 2 for Doom. And now I have Textures 2 with nothing in it. Let's go back to my project. I'll go to my original project, I'll go into my convert folder, I'll go into Textures 2 folder where I copied those textures from Awesome's post on Doomworld. In my Doom 1 one, I go into Source, I go into Convert, I go into Textures 2, and I'll just copy them in. While I'm here, I'll also copy in the new flats. And now let's load up Ultimate Doom Builder. I'll go File, New Map. This time I'm going to choose, God, it's been so long since I've done Doom 1, I haven't even got the game configuration set up. Okay, so now I've just quickly set up a Doom 1, and I'll just pick a Doom 1 Boom format, and we'll go Add Resource, and I'll browse to my project folder. I'll go into Build, I'll go into Textures. Let's go OK. I'm going to leave it so it's not being excluded. And OK, draw a box. And we come into here, let's have a look at the textures, and you can see that basically in the original Doom iWAD, you've got 124 textures in Texture 1 and 162 textures in Texture 2. And that means we've got 286 textures in Texture 1 in our Textures WAD. So that is 124 plus 162, bam, 286. So what I'm saying is that we've basically created our own Texture 1 definitions file that contains all the data from both Texture 1 and Texture 2. Let's go into Edit Map Options. I'm going to go Edit Pre and Post Commands, browse to the root of my Doom 1 project. I'm going to type in here DoomMake release. And now I can run builds by just hitting F8. So I'll hit F8. And now let's come in here. You can see that just like before, I now have all my textures only in the Texture 2 lump. separated from all the original Doom 1 textures, which are all in the TEXTURE1 lump. So I can just add them like that. And of course, because flats are basically automatically done, the flats are all sorted out anyway. Okay, if I just put a player thing in here, I don't even need to save this. I just hit play and it's working. So this is actually Doom 1. If I just put in my cheat for all my weapons, you can see I do not have the super shotgun. And if I just go to the next level, you can see I'm in Doom 1. So what we've basically done is just recreate the same kind of situation we had, where we have texture 2 is all separated from texture 1. Now, of course, this will not work with Doom 2 because this only has the Doom 1 textures in it. So it's missing all the other textures that Doom 2 requires in the texture 1 lump. So this WAD will not be compatible with Doom 2 in the way that you just load it with the command line, like the way we've been designing these resource WADs in this tutorial. I don't really mind that. If I wanted to make these kind of WADs, I would actually just release 2 copies of the texture pack, one for Doom 1, one for Doom 2. But you've got to remember that if you're running DoomTools, you don't need it to be loadable. It just makes it a lot easier to pass it off, particularly if you're passing it off publicly to other people. But if you're making one for yourself or you're making one for your project that your friends are working on with you, remember that DoomTools will handle textures for you perfectly fine. Just check out my textures tutorial for DoomTools. You can chuck any kind of texture resource WAD into the DoomTools project, and when you do your builds, it'll just pull out the data it requires and build your mega WAD without having to worry about all this compatibility of the texture 1 stuff. In fact, DoomTools is designed to ignore that. It's just that when you release a WAD publicly, you want to make it kind of foolproof, you know what I mean? Like, you can't trust that they're going to know exactly how you would do it yourself. So if you use this texture 2 trick for the Doom 1 WAD or a texture 2 trick for the Doom 2 WAD, it'll make it foolproof. They can just load it up like a normal WAD and they don't have to worry about anything else. But check out the textures tutorial to show you how to use one of these WADs in a more DoomTools kind of way, which doesn't require any of the texture 1, texture 2 compatibility stuff. But even using the DoomTools method using the textures WAD folders, I still like to use the texture 2 to create my own section separate from the Doom 1 or the Doom 2 stuff. And that allows me, when I'm editing, even if I'm using the other method in the other tutorial, to separate the original textures from all my custom textures. I just find that a lot easier to work because you just click on texture 2 and bam, you've got all the stuff that is unique to your project. Okay, and that's the end of that. That's the way I make resource WADs for public use. And I'll probably do a sister tutorial at some point. I'm going to take a break from making tutorials for a while though. And in that one, I'll talk about how to create mega WADs where you provide a resource WAD to your project group. They map away, do their thing, even if they add their own stuff into their maps, and then you correlate all that data back into the mega WAD. That's a whole nother topic because it requires merging and stuff, and that'll be the next one. So I'll see you guys next time.